Welcome. I'm Carol Papillo, President of Growth Officers Association. GOA is a nonprofit association where we bring our members together to share their experiences, share learnings with each other. We're focused on growth leaders in the GovCon space. We're thrilled to be sharing with you this new podcast series where we're going to bring together leaders from our industry to talk about topics in growth. The podcast format provides you, the listeners, the opportunity to listen to these leaders at a time that works for your schedule, bringing you ultimate flexibility in hearing these messages. Today, I'm talking with Zain Ahmed, a seasoned GovCon growth leader and visionary technology leader. In today's rapidly changing world, we can all learn from Zain's experience and his approach. Most recently, Zain spent 13 years with Lumen Technologies in a progressively challenging role. While there, he won a $1.5 billion 10-year contract for a defense infrastructure. He was able to achieve year-over-year revenue growth while also increasing EBITDA. And he guided the organization through several mergers and acquisitions. Welcome, Zain. Happy to have you here.
Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm sure with all of that impressive experience, you're going to have a lot of great insights for our audience. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and the different roles you held with Lumen?
Absolutely. So I'm a fortunate immigrant to this country. So I got here when I was 18 and been blessed with this amazing country ever since. I'm a former engineer, recovering engineer, as I say, and I got my formal business training later. But through Lumen, I've gone through multiple roles where I was leading civilian for them, at the civilian segment first, then ran federal across the board from defense, intel, and civilian, and then got to run the public sector organization, then added the East Coast as part of my public sector plus East Coast enterprise across the board. And then made the difficult decision to actually leave public sector and move to solely run the enterprise as we were bringing it together and making a harmonious organization with one culture, one processes, one way of doing business, and one kind of verbiage and communication the way we do things across the company.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. What kind of roles have you played and how has that impacted growth in the company?
So I've gone through like tremendous kind of transformation as we were bringing level 3 and CenturyLink together. It was bringing two different cultures together. One was a CLEC, another came from the LEC, ILEC side of the fence, which is one competed based on just their routes or their ability to actually convince customers to come to them. One, because they had the local exchange carrier ability and customers came to them. It was very different cultures coming together. And the beauty of it is finding the best of both worlds, because neither one of them is correct. And you got to bring the entire organization together. And that's when I took over civilian organization, which was almost 100 people. And we were working through the big, massive contract that was EIS and how do we get foothold within the space. Both companies were like 3 and 4 in competing with the larger carriers across the board. And we had to put strategies together, capture programs together to go after large programs. And the team did just an amazing job across the board, from our program teams to our capture teams, capturing billions of dollars of new programs for USDA, DOI, and the defense contract you just mentioned.
So how do you think you can help build those cultures and bring that experience together of those companies? Obviously, you were successful. The company's done really well. What do you think was the trick in there?
Well, it's a great question. And you have to be showing up as not the all-knowing person. And you have to solicit input from the people who are in the organization, saying, where do you want to be? What kind of culture do you want to have? And what makes you tick? It's like almost capturing magic in a bottle, that everybody's coming at it and going 100% and saying, we are in it together. And you got to experiment. If you don't experiment, you don't take risk. So the innovation and experimentation loop has to be in your organization as you think through how do we continue to capture additional market share? How do we grow? How do we make sure our customers are delighted at the end of the day? Because that's what creates a business to be sustainable. And delighting your customers should be part of your culture from day one, from how you're thinking about customer centricity, on making sure we're all about our customers from when they come on board to when they leave. They leave in a good way as well. But you want to keep them. Sometimes they do leave because it's a government world where you have to go through contracts, but you want to make sure they have a good lifetime journey through your world.
So how does the growth leader impact that? In one of the hot topics in our industry, chief growth officer, right? Growth leaders can come in lots of different roles, but how do you think they impact that growth and that customer relationship?
They're at the center heart of the corporation itself, connecting the finance organization, connecting the product organization, connecting the operations, making sure the board is understanding where the customer feedback is coming from and how you think differently about what you're going to go to. So one, you have to have innovation in your world and continuous improvement and thinking through how you're going to go bring new customers, how you're going to change the market as it shifts. Our markets are changing constantly.
Absolutely.
And the pace of change has just become so greater than we've ever seen before. So adaptability is a big part, which is the second pillar of how you think about things. How quickly can you adapt your processes, your way to go to market, how you approach your people? So that becomes another cornerstone. Third is around the culture you're going to go create. Because without the people, there is no magic in the company. And so what kind of people you want, what kind of values do you want to show to them that one is aspired, that you write on walls and say, this is where we want to be. One is lived. And how close are they? If they're too far apart, people sniff it out.
Right.
So as a leader, you have to live those values that you aspire to and showcase for your people to say, how do you replicate this across the organization?
So how do you take those people that are so important to the organization and help grow them as leaders?
That's a fantastic question because it's so close to my heart. Because I've had the privilege of multiple leaders and mentors and bosses through my life that have coached me, mentored me, and provided the know-how to actually figure out how to continue to evolve. So as you think about it, one, for me, like there's three that kind of top of mind for me. One is around coaching and mentoring for your people. And coaching and mentoring are two different things because coaching is more about managing people and working through it. But mentoring is truly being invested in them and thinking about how they're going to grow, what avenues you're going to go provide for them, and then creating those pathways for them. Second, for me, is around training. And that is around continuous learning. You have to have the attitude, but then you also have to create, as a leader, pathways for your next gen leaders to be able to avail those resources and go through those things. I was fortunate enough, my old boss actually showed me the path. He said, go get your MBA while you're working. That was a life-changing thing for me. If he hadn't done that for me, I don't know if I've gone and had the belief in myself that I could do that. So doing the same for others as they think through things about how do you go invest in yourself and work through that piece is super important. And then this last piece is such important thing that you have to, feedback is the third pillar that I would talk about. And how do you take feedback and how do you give feedback? Because both of those things are important. There's a gold standard for like how do you take feedback is be open, because that's the perspective the other person has, and be able to consume it and say, okay, that's how they're seeing it. And you take multiple points, and if that's the fact that how people are experiencing you, that's the truth. And then what do you do with it? How do you change? And then giving feedback, you have to be kind as you work through it because the other person is working through it. So, and be constructive with it and say, I'm invested in you. How do I push you forward? How do you create this pathways for you to be successful?
That's always the challenge as a leader, right? How you can have those kind of honest conversations with people and still have that strong relationship where they're going to accept that kind of information. Yeah.
It's about trust. If they truly believe you're in it for them versus in it for yourself or the company or whatever the short-term goal is, it's always the long game, the long-term gain, both for the company as for the employee you're working with, showing them that you're truly in it for them and they're going to benefit from whatever feedback you're giving them.
So you mentioned your experience with merger and acquisition and bringing new cultures together, or creating a new culture, bringing two separate ones together. How do you see our industry? There's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions over the last several years. How do you think that impacts the growth within our industry?
I think there's going to be a shift. There's going to be new incumbents coming in with artificial intelligence being in our world. How quickly?
Yeah, I want to talk about that one too.
Yeah, it's freeing how quickly you can actually create something. There's a company that was created by Chamath, is 90-10. You can take 90% of the features for 10% of the cost, right? So artificial intelligence is able to do that for you because it's a co-creator with you, it's a strategic partner for you, and how you think about things. You can create new innovations at a rapid pace, and like the good old days of having multiple past performance, like it's going to shift a little bit on how you think about solutions and technologies. I even think about how government is going to be evaluating.
Exactly.
And writing RFPs.
There's multiple aspects to
Yeah.
think about the AI side, not just from us as the contractors, but how is the government going to apply AI
Right.
in the evaluation process and delivering programs? Yeah, a lot of dimensions there.
Yeah.
Do you think that ultimately it will be a positive thing for the industry?
Any innovation that we've gone through, just think of the internet or think of like computers coming through our world.
Oh.
It's always been positive, and it frees us up to do even more. The innovations that we can create or solve world problems like cancer, that's going to show up with the next generation of AI, when artificial superintelligence comes into place. Of course, we got to like rein it in and have the parameters around how we're going to go release it. But these things come into play, and they can solve such vast amounts of data and go through them and continuously improve without a human being involved. How quickly could we solve some of these problems?
Yeah, clearly you can draw on that technology leader I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So do you think we can implement AI in a ethical way, in a way that's kind of a balanced approach? I know a lot of people are nervous that it's going to take away their jobs. Our industry, we've had a growth cycle that's pretty well established and similar in our companies. How is it going to disrupt all of that?
Well, I was just pointing back to like how the computers came into being, and now like laptops are everywhere, tablets, it's in your phone, right? You can do majority of the things on your phone. And this evolution will continue to happen. Either we embrace it or we fight it. And embracing is the right way to go about thinking about certain things, especially about technology evolution. It's going to change the way we live and how we operate, how we work, and it just frees up us to do higher level tasks. Thinking about how to use the AI itself. And we're in the age of AGI, which is, our artificial general intelligence. It thinks like a human. It's not continuously like thinking like a human and continuously improving, but it does think and replicate and gives you answers that you're looking for, similar to how a human would do. But it's not quite there. There are bounds that we got to have, because there's got to be responsible AI with it. And there's a couple of things that you got to think through. And to me, like four of them are really important around, how do you protect the data and the governance of it? Second is ethical use of it. Where are we going to go implement? What are we going to do? Are we going to use drone strikes, or like where are we going to go implement this in the right way where it could be used ethically? The third one is around bias mitigation itself, because bias comes into AI because it feeds off of who created the model and what data we gave him. So having that thorough kind of recognition. Lastly, I would say regulation. How do we go think through what the existing regulations are? How do we implement them in a manner that complies with it?
So let's switch gears a little bit, talk about our GovCon industry. Where do you see that headed? I mean, obviously, this conversation plays into that direction a little.
Yeah.
But where do you think the industry is going to be in, say, 2030?
Oof. I wish I had those magic 8 balls I could give you an
Oh,
answer,
yeah,
a
you'd
crystal
be
ball that I could go through.
Yeah.
I'm going to probably fail at predicting it, but my way of thinking about probably is it's going to continue down the path of how we've been thinking about data itself and data modernization. And we say that data modernization, it's a big swath. AI comes into that now too.
Mm-hmm.
Cybersecurity has been part of it. You got to create your infrastructure in a way that's protectable. The second is around how your cyber posture is, and then how do you introduce the data in AI in a responsible manner that it continues to feed off of it. Second, I see a lot of decisions being based off of data it comes through. The data we ingest and we work through, and how do we simplify our citizens' lives itself? How do we make it so easy without friction for a citizen to engage with the government? At the state level, at the Fed level, how can I quickly get my driver's license downloaded on my phone without even going to...
You mean you don't just take the picture and store it in your photos?
Yeah. Or you could do that, but digitally,
But there's got to be a better way, right?
And you don't have to stand in a line for an MVA appointment. So how do I make that super easy, frictionless for my citizens to live through and work through life within my state, my country itself? And lastly, I would say we've seen a better embrace of public-private partnership. That's going to continue to kind of foster and provide the force multiplier to move us forward.
Great. I know you've invested a lot in this industry and participating in different associations and kind of contributing to the larger whole. What's your view on associations and the role they play in this industry?
They're amazing. I've seen them play out in front of me, and I see kind of 3 main areas where I see industries play. One, it provides an avenue for people-to-people conversation, networking. You're able to go have conversations and discuss your point of view versus other, and you can have a lively debate about the conversation itself, and you get to know the person behind the badge or the email that shows up in your inbox. So that's a great place to be. Second, I would say advocacy, making sure the industry understands the government and government understands where the industry is coming from, where the risk can be manageable for both, and kind of the merriment of that. That's a big part that I've seen a lot of the kind of organizations come into play and create that environment. And competition is always there, right? We're all together at the table, but it's getting that general viewpoint and providing that across the board. And last thing I would say is around professional development. And that is a big part of, as you go through kind of the journey through government world and land, like both sides coming together and learning new things and understanding each other's perspective and continue their development.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things I love about our GOA events is getting people together and exchanging ideas and having some conversation about
It's a
things.
beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
It really is, yeah. Zain, you mentioned how impactful getting your MBA was. Can I pull on that thread a little bit and have you elaborate?
Sure. My wife vouches for it, so it's pretty amazing. Like, your wife sees the growth you went through. It was so beneficial both from a personal and professional perspective. Professionally, the 3 main areas that I would like to pull on. I was genuinely like an engineer and kind of a sales leader working through life. And that taught me like different aspects of the business, from thinking about how do you do design thinking, how do you think about accounting, how do you think about finance, and making sure what actions you do and how they show up in the business. So that was just eye-opening to see, and you get to learn how much you don't know. So it's a very humbling experience to go through. Second was around understanding how do you communicate, how do you talk through people, how do you take people with you. This is the part of communication itself and collaborating with people. And the EQ part comes into play for you. How do you communicate something that's a tough message to somebody? And they teach you all this in our program, which is amazing to go through. Lastly, I went through a self-discovery from a leadership perspective. How do you want to show up as a leader? That was a question asked. And you got to baseline yourself. And we went through a 360 evaluation. I almost showed up with 3 different personalities. My boss saw me one way, my peers saw me one way, my employees saw me one way. And we went through that and said, do you want to show up this way? It's so hard to live that life that way. So you had to mash it up to your authentic leadership and how do you want to show up? And that was one of the most kind of ground-changing, foundational moving for you as a human being, because you start to impact how people experience you, and you want it to be consistent. That's how you build trust with people. And it's just a foundational level that you get it right, it'll always stick with you.
Yeah, that authenticity comes right through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So how do you manage these days with people being remote, they're dispersed all over the place? That leads to a lot of challenges as a leader. What are some of your tricks and tips?
Yeah, I think about this from a 3 probably main kind of areas. Communication is number 1 as you work through things, because if you don't communicate and don't tell your teams how things are going, what is happening, and what impacts they're going to go through, or what changes you're bringing, and they get surprised, it doesn't fall. Nobody works through that well. Second is, how do you do change management in a remote environment? It has to go through communication, making sure you're repeating yourself. There's, I did these 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute videos weekly to just get people talking, thinking through what is top of mind. And even within that change management, how do you get to the frontline leaders and make sure they're understanding the changes you're trying to drive? Because I've seen it, the change happens at the frontline leaders. So as you get into that leadership bubble, you need to get down and understand how are you going to continuously communicate to them so they can impact change to the front line, and how your customer feels you, because experiences you, because that's the way customers see it, and experience is everything to a customer. And lastly, I would say, as you think about how do you reward people, both I think of rewards, financial and non-financial. Those are pretty easy. Financially, you can think through, how do I do incentive alignment, making sure things are right and people are getting paid for what they do, and what impact they make to the corporation. The non-financial pieces are important as well. How do people get recognition for the work that they do? How do they feel about it? What do they want to be represented for? How do you reward them for that? It's not non-financial. It could be as easy as them being in that video and being recognized. And it means a lot to people. So how do you think through that framework and making sure you weave all of it through your organization?
Great. So in thinking about how you build leaders within the organization, when you're all distributed, working remotely, how do you make those connections and identify those leaders and help them get the tools they need to grow and become that next era leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I'm really passionate about. So you can probably see me glow up when I talk about leaders and developing people. And this is the part where I think there's 2 sort of leaders you think about. One is your direct reports. Second is the people, we call them rock stars, or high potential people.
Right.
People call it all different things, but these are the people who want to go do things and want to innovate and disrupt the industry, disrupt whatever is happening, and challenge the norm. They're in it with the company and trying to go at it. So I'll talk to the first piece where they're your direct reports and how do you kind of work through development of it. I've had a framework that was given to me that was just been phenomenal for me, where I ask my direct reports, what do they want out of life, both personally and professionally? Mm-hmm. And when they end their career, where are they going to be? And then we go through kind of a series of questions as to what steps need to be, what must be true for you to get there. And so create, kind of reverse engineer back to what that takes. And then we create a development plan that we go execute on. But this goes to the fundamental thing where they're like, this guy is in it for me. this gal isn't for me. They're invested. They want to see me grow both personally and professionally. Second piece that we were talking about is the high potential leaders. You give them opportunities to interact with senior executives, yourself. I'd set up almost a monthly thing where we would just get together, talk about whatever is on their mind. And I'd share what I learned about different things, about leadership. We pick a topic, or I learn from them. Because learning is both ways. And they have a wealth of knowledge of what they're seeing, even if it's a new trend that's showing up on TikTok. Just getting to understand what is on their mind, what's in their psyche, I'll learn a lot. So those are the two things like that have helped me grow leaders and continuously make sure our people are thriving and growing. And it doesn't like if you invest in your people, the best thing that could happen is they stay. And the worst thing if you don't invest in your people is they stay. Which stay do you want? So pick the one you want and embrace it.
Great advice. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. I think you've got a lot of great experience, a lot of great insights for us. Any parting ideas that you want to leave with our audience?
Yeah, I would say as you're thinking through, we're talking about growth here. So one, embrace growth. It's part of life. About yourself, your continuous learning journey, including your company. How are you going to create sustainable growth for your company? And then balance growth. Second thing is around balancing growth because you want to be responsibly growing. One of the things like I always talk about is not jumping out of the plane without a parachute. So growing within your bounds, making sure your cash flow is there, you're responsibly growing from an EBITDA perspective, you're thinking about how the culture is going to get impacted long term as you make decisions. And lastly, I would say create a culture of learning in your organization. The organizations that learn and can embrace and attack whatever changes that come their way and work through with it because you can't fight the tide. So how do you create that culture that continuously learns and evolves as the market dynamics shift?
Yeah, I think that's great advice, thinking about the long term and then just embracing that evolution that's going to be inevitable, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining
Appreciate
us. All right, that's a wrap for today. I'm Carol Papillo with Growth Officers Association. We're pleased that you joined us on this podcast and hope that you join us for our future sessions with other growth leaders.